our co-worker at the Institute of Contemporary History.
Okay, hello to everybody. Today I'll present my latest findings on the use of water power, of hydropower in the period between the First and the Second World War. I will focus on the part of the Slovenian territory that was assigned to the Kingdom of Italy after the Treaty of Rapallo in 1920. In the past, so this is the territory that I'm focusing on. In the past, I have dealt briefly with large projects with hydroelectric power plants built by Italian electric companies on the Soče River, with the projects that were realized and the ones that were not. And this time I will focus on small plants, on small private owners, and on their stories. So, because the First World War and the annexation to the Kingdom of Italy meant an extremely big change for the owners of sawmills and mills on this territory, also of owners of small hydroelectric plants and other artisan facilities. As early as in 1922, the Goriška region passed a law that gave the region and the municipalities a priority in the use of water resources. And in 1923, the Italian law on public works came to force also on this territory. So the applications for the right to use public waters were no longer examined in the order in which they were submitted, but they were assessed from the point of view of public benefit, which puts small owners in a clearly unequal position. The legislation applicable to this area did not grant a direct transfer of the Austrian permits for the right to use public water. So the owners had to reapply in able to continue with their activities. These applied to owners of existing power plants who wanted to legalize their facilities, as I have said, to the owners of those plants that had been destroyed during the First World War and who wished to rebuild or modernize their plants and expand their activities, and to all those who started their activity from scratch. The archival material on which I mostly base my research is therefore extremely important, as it provides a cross-section of data and gives an insight into a technical heritage that existed on the various water courses in the area concerned, and that is now mainly lost. The vast majority were small local owners, but there are also some capitalist representatives who saw and who took it as an investment. What did it mean for an owner what did this requirement mean? This requirement placed an extraordinary burden on the owners. They had to hire one of the licensed engineers who would draw up a plan of the plant, of the existing plant, and made all necessary technical documentation. All this was in Italian, of course. They had to provide proof that they had already carried out this activity in the previous country, in Austria-Hungary, for at least a period of 30 years, either with documents or with witnesses. And they had to also obtain the approval of the parties involved in the procedure. This was other neighboring owners, as well as various state institutions like the military, the Department for the Conservation of Monuments, the Department of Roads, Railways, other owners who already use the same water course, and so on and so on. It depended on each case, basically. They also had to pay for the water permit. And depending on the installed power, they had to also pay an annual concession fee, which had to be paid in advance if they wanted to carry out the activity. These permits were generally granted for a period of 30 years and had to be renewed in the event of a change of ownership, and also at the end of the 30 years, which of course did not happen because the Kingdom of Italy collapsed in 43. If the owner did not apply for a renewal, the building either became state property or the owner had to remove it on his own expense and restore the surrounding area to its original state. The water courses in this area had already been used in the past, so it's not a new phenomenon. But with exception of the Možnica power plant, they were mostly smaller, self-sufficient facilities. A relatively small part of the area was electrified. If I go back to that plant, Postojna because of the Postojna cave, Idrija because of the mercury mine, and Ajdovščina because of the industry. When the area was annexed to Italy after the integration into the Italian state, the water power became even more important because with the general lack of other energy sources, it was water energy that was considered to be the most important source of energy self-sufficiency of the population. But as I had said, there were no large hydroelectric power plants here before the interwar period. The larger towns had thermal power plants, but water was an important driving force. The electrification of this very fragmentary and geographically diverse area was an investment that stretched even the new Italian government, although it wanted to prove in every way that it was bringing progress to a barbaric, developed area and a population that needed to be civilized. In these archival sources, I have almost 400 different permit applications. However, the number of applications can be misleading, as it can give the impression of an extraordinary entrepreneurial development in the area, but in fact, most of them are, as they were described in the sources, deplorables, primitives, and only few of those who try to keep up technologically with the Italian electricity companies. The fact is that more than half of them apply to small, mostly self-sufficient mills for family use or for the most close surroundings. In some cases, they combined mills with sawmills, and this was the so-called Venetian source that Italian officials described as outdated and uncompetitive. There were about 40 applications for hydroelectric power plants, and less than 10 of each of different mechanical workshops and various industrial plants in this region, with investors from Trieste, Gorica, and other places. Among the projects, we can find only 3 irrigation projects. It also should be emphasized that among the plans for the new projects in particular, there were many that were ultimately not realized because of the economic crisis that hit in the 30s. So I have to divide the non-realized from the realized when I will write for our publication. But in list of terms of number of plants that legalized their already existing activities, we can say the hydropower was in fact a very important driving force in this area, and that people used hydropower to facilitate their work on daily basis. So as I said, we know the number of plants, so around 400, and we know also their exact appearance, the materials that they were built in, And also there was some fundamental consideration regarding environmental impact of the facilities already. The environmental requirements were initially very limited and mainly related to the form of construction, because due to the torrential nature of the watercourses in the area, with a very uneven distribution of water contact throughout the year, most of the buildings were not built directly on the riverbeds and streams, but on a diversion. So there were special channels that diverted the water course, the water flow, and ensured a more steadily flow of water on the mill or on the turbine. The project documents provide data about usually of every project provide data about the water flow, the average water flow, and its peaks and its lows. So it's an interesting, the data are interesting to compare with nowadays. It states the required water flow needed for the operation of the facility. And on the other hand, the state officials determined the minimum water flow that the owners had to were obliged to guarantee through the primary water-based, if I am clear enough. If the water flow required for the activity was not available all year round, the permit could also be granted for a certain number of months. The owner of the facility could also be charged with the maintenance of the nearby watercourses as such, the removal of garbage, the maintenance of the banks, and also about the care of the fish stock. The latter did not always go hand in hand because for the purposes of flood protection, they were forced to lower the riverbed, sometimes even for a half a meter each year, which of course severely affected the life in the riverbeds. As an example, I would like to make a point is initiative of a baron, Herman de Levetzow. Of course, he was not a typical small businessman, but his case is interesting because he was trying to invest capital in a sawmill located in the middle of a dense settlement of Vipava. He proposed an upgrading of a water saw, which meant an intervention in the town center and in the lives of the nearby of the neighbors who have become accustomed of not living next to a sawmill. There was a sawmill there until the 1930s, when in a fire it was destroyed, and because of the crisis in the timber industry, it was not renewed. And this Herman de Levetzow had the idea, saw an opportunity to rebuild it. And he saw this business opportunity and even applied for an emergency operating license to start the business as soon as possible, and he was unsuccessful. He was not granted with this extraordinary license. On the contrary, the technical office decided that an on-site visit, which was not always part of the procedure, was necessary to see the facilities in nature. So the investor planned to deepen and renovate the existing dam structure, to change the way that the gates worked, and so on. The concession applicant also undertook to carry out regular maintenance of the associated facilities and to maintain the condition of the watercourse, which was neglected by then and was endangering the surrounding facilities, the surrounding buildings with every rain, basically. But the most complex requirements were posed by the fish conservation authorities, il Consorzio per la tutela della pesca della Venezia Giulia. They asked him to build lateral bypass channel that would allow the passage of fish and other river life. In fact, they noted that the planned project would interrupt the flow of water in a particularly important point for the conservation and reproduction of fish population of the Vipava River. The construction of suitable facilities would have to allow the uninterrupted passage of fish through the plant locks upstreams. Without this, the owner would have the obligation to insert at least 10,000 of fish fry to the river every year in the period and method prescribed by the water conservation authorities. So they have they've determined which fish, when, and how. So it was quite they were quite strict. I have also one other project that was also competed for the water permit, that was planned with the purpose of preserving or revitalizing the natural environment. This was the construction of a fish farm in Kobarit. Due to the construction of large hydro plants, in fact, the fish stock declined on Soče River sharply, and the fish farm therefore had no economic purpose on itself, but it was built with the intent of breeding the trout fry and their subsequent release in the Soče and its tributaries, in order to reintroduce the trout in areas where it has disappeared due to human intervention. As we have heard in the first by the keynote speaker, the hydropower plants stopped the natural flow on the river. The water was suddenly warmer, less clear, the water course has changed, and so on and so on. Unfortunately, as we all know, the path to hell is often paved with good intentions, no? And when they started to reintroduce the trout, it was not the native Soče trout, the Salmo marmoratus. They breeded brown trout, Salmo truta, leaving the native species severely endangered, up to a point that it has almost completely disappeared from Soče and the nearby rivers, and was only saved a few decades ago. So there were extreme efforts to undo the damage that was done in the 30s with the best intentions. Salmo marmoratus was saved. The eel, however, it was not. Anguilla has completely disappeared from the Soče River after the hydropower plants were built, as the dams completely stopped the migration of the fish. So there were of course consequences on the environment. So and also I have to say that since the mid-1930s, the reports also included a statement on whether the proposed activity poses a pollution risk for the river. I think that the topic is worth exploring because it's a confluence of economic, national, ideological, and environmental factors. It is about the combined influence of political and economic interests on the local environment, its development, and on the lives of the local population. I have to say that there were initially no problems or discrimination in granting the permits to Slovenian-speaking citizens. They, of course, had to use a translator, although the process was led only in Italian. But however, in the end of 30s, a paragraph suddenly appears in the document characterizing the applicant as ideologically suitable or not, without a criminal record or not, And finally, after 38, also if it is the applicant is a member of the Jewish race or not. It can be argued that the applicants were treated according to the same procedure as other Italian citizens, formally. The applications were therefore not rejected unless there were objections from other parties to the proceedings, or there was a direct conflict of interest. Let's say if a Slovenian small investor collided with the interest sphere of a larger Italian company. So instead of a discrimination on the basis of nationality, we can mainly speak on a discrimination on the basis of capital. The Slovenian capital was simply unable to compete with the Italian capital. The cooperatives that appear in these documents, that with cooperative mills, saws, and so on, collapsed one after another. And in any case, it's also obvious that all these activities were an important source of income, that a lot of women took over these activities after the First World War, that they managed the activities, and that they appear as owners, mostly widows, of course, after the loss of husbands, that they continue with the activities. So I can say that the activities were, of course, conditioned by the environment. They have adapted to the torrential nature of watercourses, but so far I can say that I have not found a permit application that would have been refused because of environmental reasons. So I think that economic reasons prevailed. They made some conditions for the safeguard of the environment, but they did not stop the whole project just because of the environmental cause. So thank you very much.